Expat finances. Here are the issues we're going to talk about: why live abroad, taxes, cost of living, money transfers, small businesses and investment products, health insurance, investment accounts, and estate planning. So, starting with why live abroad, there's about 9 million Americans living abroad, and their top locations are definitely Mexico and Canada, number one and two, then Germany, Philippines, Israel, and the UK. One of the big reasons is cost of living, including healthcare costs, that people choose to spend time in another country. Climate's a reason. Long term care kind of goes with cost of living. Relationships, study, and work push people out of the US. Retirement, and some people just seeking adventure or a change. The biggest issues we see are taxes for sure, cost of living, efficiently and cheaply transferring money, investment products in small businesses, health insurance, investment accounts, and estate planning. So we're going to hit all of those. So taxes, if you're a US citizen, you're paying US taxes if your income is more than the standard deduction. You're going to file your taxes each year, and it's on worldwide income. US is one of there's not a ton of countries that do this, but we're one of the few that tax you on any income you have. Um, you the tax advantages you get for IRA contributions, Roth contributions, 529s, that really depends on the tax status. Even charitable contributions depend on what your situation is. So it depends on if you're paying US taxes above the exemption that you're getting for the foreign taxes you're paying. So if you're earning income in the US and living abroad, earning income abroad, and then what's the difference in the tax rates between them will determine if you can do tax deferred or uh, tax deductible charities or retirement account contributions. Owning a business in the host country, you still have to declare that income for US taxes. um, Social Security benefit, as with tax deferred contributions, it depends on that tax bracket, that tax situation you have in the host country, if you're going to have anything count towards your US taxes. There's a bilateral tax treaty with a bunch of countries. It's not everyone you'd imagine, but a lot of countries, and that allows it allows you not to be double taxed. It allows your foreign taxes that you pay up to the income of 126,500 of earned income abroad. If you're paying foreign taxes on it, you can deduct that from your US taxes. There's even this provision to exclude foreign housing. There's a foreign housing exemption. Your tax obligation will depend on your residency in the host country. So depending on that, you may be paying foreign taxes or paying taxes in the host country. There's an F bar. If you have an account, a foreign bank account that exceeds $10,000, you have to report it in the US. You have to file this F bar. There's no tax. They're not charging you to have that. You just have to file it, and there are penalties if you don't file it. They just want to know where your money is if it's out of the US. And then if it's over 200,000, you have to file form 8938. Again, there's not a tax for having a foreign account. You just have to pay taxes. You just have to file it with your tax return. State taxes, in most states, actually, you're going to be filing as an expat on your income. There are several states, I believe 7, that don't have any state income tax. And so if you're a resident of one of those states, then you don't have to worry about state taxes. But otherwise, you're going to, if your address, if your residency, even if you're out of the country is, well, depending on what state it's in, that will determine if you're paying state taxes. You get some extended filing deadlines, children's taxes. If children are born abroad, they're still going to have to, they're subject to US tax regulations. Selling property abroad could be a consideration for capital gains. So you have to be careful with a lot of transactions. Gifting is another one. Just be careful with where you are located. We have a client in Spain who was gifted money. They have to pay taxes on that in Spain. It isn't a taxable event in the US, but it is there. Um, Options, stock options are treated differently in some countries. So you just have to be careful to be aware of what the implications will be. And then you might want to do it a different way. Another big issue is cost of living. You know, it's exciting being in a new place, and there can be, it's good to be prepared. Just get a good understanding of what the expenses will be, what the costs are. Um, there are a lot of resources. There are blogs, there's Facebook groups, there's different calculators that'll give you an idea. But we have seen that it's easy to underestimate your daily expenses. Um, there's a lot of expenses that you might not be considering. One is, yeah, acting like a tourist or living like a tourist while you're in this new country, seeing all the attractions, living in the or spending a lot of time in the expat or the touristy areas, which are going to be more expensive. Whereas if you use a calculator, it's saying, well, here's the average cost of living for a native, someone living there who's from there. If you're just in the touristy areas, you could have a bloated expenses. Lifestyle creep we see in the US, and if you're living abroad, just gradually increasing your standard of living. Things that used to be luxuries become just normal expenditures. Socializing, networking, that could include a lot of going out or activities. As within the US, just meeting new people, dating, those types of things. There's expense, there's a cost to entertainment that you want to just make sure you consider. Housing is the biggest expense. Just, I guess, be clear, the rental, if you're in an expat community or by the beach or in touristy areas, the cost will be more than just the average cost of living that you might see on a calculator. Healthcare costs and insurance, that's going to be something you want to factor in. Education, schooling, if you're moving with kids, private schools, that's an expense that could even be more than the US. Transportation, depending if you're bringing a car or buying a car, or what kind of public transportation you're using, that's an expense to consider. Currency fluctuations, it could be an issue. We've seen that in Mexico, just the peso's gotten stronger, so your dollar doesn't go as far, and that impacts your style of living. Unexpected costs, visas, residency permits, there's going to be unexpected costs, and just moving costs. Anytime you move, there's expenses that you might not have foreseen. So just be careful with that when you're budgeting where you're going. You see these lists of here's the cheapest countries, but if you go to Lake Chapala or Ajijic or some, beach community, it may be a little bit more expensive. Money transfers. This is a big thing that you're going to have happening all the time. You're moving money from Social Security or some income. I mean, a lot of people, if you're earning in your host country, then that's a different situation. But still, you may, even earning in the host country, if you're saving, you may be transferring it back to your investment account in the US. So transferring money into the host country from the US even saving a percent could, in the long run, save a lot. So it'll be different for whatever country you're dealing with. We found with Mexico, U.S. Mexico, that one of the best ways was having a Mexican bank account, and we use Wise in transfer. We found it was cheaper than these partner banks. Sometimes there's banks that have a, I don't know if you call it a sister bank or a partner bank in the host country. And we found their exchange rate wasn't as good, even though their fees were lower. The overall transfer costs ended up being more expensive. But there's a lot of different options. Um, Local banks probably make sense in most situations for your day-to-day expenses. You may want a more stable currency, so you might not want most of your money left in the U.S. But it may help having a local bank account, and then you can do some bigger transfers. Credit cards, debit cards, just be careful of the fees because that can add up too. If it's a 3% charge, make sure you have a credit card that's not going to charge that. We find it helpful to have a U.S. address. This might not work for everyone. If you've committed to moving abroad, you don't want you don't have a convenient connection, or you don't want to pay for a service in a certain state. But the advantage of having a U.S. address for getting Medicare, for setting up bank accounts, certain investment accounts. If you have an Italian address, the Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard won't allow you to have a brokerage account. There's just different rules, and it can be convenient to have a U.S. address. Yeah, I think that's it. Just do your research on your credit cards too, and even debit cards. Tax implications for transferring large sums. There could be tax issues. Currency fluctuations. I've heard people talk about trying to buy more when the currency's cheap. And sure, if it's historically down, great. But I more just do dollar cost averaging, because looking back, of course, you could say, oh, that was really low back then. But as it goes down, you don't know if it's going to go down more. You don't know what the future holds. So I like just dollar cost averaging and regularly transferring in for expenses. Um, yeah, compliance, emergency fund accessibility. Just, yeah, have money available, whether it's at the local host country bank or that's easily transferable in case something happens. And definitely have a long-term financial plan. That's key to what you're going to be doing. Investment products. So just be real careful with this. Expats are targets for salespeople trying to pitch something. I think we're also suckers for friends and even family that are setting up small businesses that you want to support. Just do your due diligence, know how much you can lose, how much are you comfortable with investing, because a lot of, well, same within the US, investing in the businesses of friends and families could turn into a gift real easily. Um, get local advice for sure on the local markets, and be diverse with your investments. Don't put everything into some real estate venture in your host country. Um, Necessarily, I'm not giving specific financial advice, but just saying in general, stay diversified. Understand legal implications if you're investing, um, what the long term commitment is, and keep up on the investment. I'm not saying don't invest locally in some startup business. A lot of people do. That's great. If you're starting a restaurant or a business yourself, or a real estate rental or hotel, not saying that's bad. Just do your research. Investing in real estate might not be the same as investing in real estate in the US. Um, Insurance. I guess this is a big issue. You can, if things go smoothly, probably just use the local healthcare and you'll be fine. But it is, most people are going to want to have health insurance just to cover emergencies. If you stay there for several years, depending on the country, you can probably move into the host country's insurance if there is a government or state insurance. The um, but in the meantime, you're probably going to need an insurance policy. You can use tourist policies for a while from the US, but most likely you're going to want to get a local policy in the host country to cover, depending on what your healthcare needs are, but emergencies at least, and then other healthcare concerns. Your Medicare, most likely you're going to want to keep supporting in case you come back. So you're going to want to maintain that. Coverage. Yeah. So, because if you let it lapse, you're going to have a lot higher payments later, just depending on your situation. Maybe you're never coming back to use it, but you want to be sure, I guess. There's healthcare requirements, could be physicals, could just be fill out a form. Limitations and exclusions. Life insurance, I guess, if you're counting on US life insurance in another country, make sure that that's, the tax implications in the host country and in your country. And yeah, the beneficiary setups and that it's going to meet your needs. There is emergency medical evacuation coverage that might make sense depending on where you're living, might not. Yeah, understand the local system, what the costs are before you have an emergency or before you need help, because it could run up an expensive bill if you don't know what the coverage is and what's being covered for a foreigner, depending on what your residency status is, if you're a temporary resident or what your situation is. Yeah, consult with a local insurance person would be helpful. Okay, investments. Generally, we recommend leaving your investment accounts in the US. They're low fees, they're regulated by the SEC, you have good liquidity, good tax considerations. It's usually the best situation. Now be aware of what the rules are because capital gains may be treated, even if it's in your US account, may be taxed in your host country. So just be aware of what those tax situations are. Types of investment accounts, depending if you can do in retirement accounts. And now retirement accounts, you may be paying taxes in the US on those funds you're pulling out. You may not be taxed in the host country, and you may, depending on the country and what the situation is. Currency exposure is something to consider. You don't want to be overexposed in the host country currency generally. And understand fees. That's a good rule for in the US or abroad, anytime. Be aware if you have an advisor, what are their commissions? What are the loads? How are you being charged? Is it a fee only firm and you're just paying hourly advice, or if they're paying based on assets under management? What types of products are you limited to? Sometimes if you don't have a US address, you're limited to just exchange traded funds. You can't do mutual funds or CDs. So yeah, be aware. We'd recommend using a fee only fiduciary advisor because then they're working on your behalf, not charging commissions. Yeah, ETFs. There could be some restrictions based on what your residency is. If you're trying to keep the US account, you might have to set up a trust for a US account if you're living overseas. Consulting, yeah, depending on your situation there. Okay, estate plan. And I think I mentioned this, but estate plan, this is critical. This is what happens if you die, your will, your trust. It also can be helpful while you're alive with a healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney who can act on your behalf while you can't, while you're alive. There can be some complexities, but a lot of times it's as simple as where are your assets? What needs to happen? Are there beneficiaries on all the assets? Are they even going to go through the will or probate? Maybe they have beneficiaries on them. Real estate, how's that going to be considered? And then where you're spending most of your time is probably where you want your powers of attorney, your living will, the the documents that allow someone to act on your behalf while you're alive, or living will is how long are you going to stay plugged into life support if you're in a vegetative state. So you want to just consider those documents and what would happen, what are the consequences, what's the estate tax limits in the host country and in the US? Are they going to impact you? Is there going to be some strategy that makes sense, or is it pretty straightforward? There's accounts with beneficiaries, and you have some small accounts with beneficiaries and your powers of attorney in the host country. So it's just something to consider because it can be a mess, and you do want your beneficiaries to receive your assets, whether it's people or organizations. Um, yeah, if families are in multiple countries, it could be an issue. Also, even gifting. We had a client who their parent gifted them money, and they were tagged. This was in Spain, and they're actually taxed on gifts. And there wasn't a taxable event in the US, but it doesn't mean it won't be in another country. And it was a US parent giving money to a US account, but they were going to get taxed pretty heavily in Spain. Probate, that's when assets go through courts before they go to beneficiaries. That's it can be different in the host country, and even understanding it in the US is if you don't have beneficiaries on accounts, then it could end up going through probate. Or if you have a trust, you can avoid probate as well. Estate planning professionals in the US and abroad are highly recommended. And if, depending on what countries you're dealing with, um, maybe you can get a cross border estate planning person, and that would be ideal, someone who understands the two countries. If it's Mexico or Canada, there's plenty of professionals. If it's some small, obscure country, it may be harder. Um, Updating estate documents regular, that's for expats and for anyone in the US too. If you have life changes, buy a house, get married, kids grow up, or people die that are executors or in your will, just keep them up to date so that your desires get met upon death or upon incapacity when you need some support. We're still on estate planning. Okay, structures, trusts, and understanding tax implications. That's huge. Okay, I just have a few pictures from this is Lake Chapala area in Mexico. Yeah, there's beautiful, wonderful reasons to be an expat. You can find out more at our website, AIOfinancial.com. We have a free expat ebook. It's at AIOfinancial.com/resources. We do have some social media sites you can get some information from our feeds. You can get more information though at AIOfinancial.com. We are fee only comprehensive financial planners. We can help with any aspects of your financial well-being. We work with ongoing clients based on assets under management, the assets we're managing, and we also do one-time consultations. So let us know if you need any help. Hope this was helpful. Enjoy your adventure. Bye.